The rain fell hard that evening, turning the streets of New Orleans into small rivers. Droplets bounced off the worn pavement, creating a rhythm that only the lonely could truly hear. Among the rushing people with their umbrellas and raincoats hurrying to get somewhere dry was a small figure who didn't seem to mind the downpour. This was Joey, a skinny 12-year-old boy with eyes that seemed too old for his face. He walked slowly, his shoes making a squelching sound with every step. The soles had holes in them, and his feet had been wet for so long that he barely noticed anymore. His dark hair stuck to his forehead, and water dripped down his face, mixing with what might have been tears, though he would never admit to crying. Joey hadn't always lived like this. Once he had a home with a piano his grandmother had left behind when she passed. It was old and slightly out of tune, but to Joey it was magic. His fingers would dance across those keys for hours while his mom worked double shifts at the hospital. But then came the fire, the insurance that wouldn't pay, and now they lived in the shelter on the edge of town, 3 miles. That's how far he had walked tonight after his mom's car finally gave up for good on their way back from the hospital where she worked. "You go on ahead," she had told him, her eyes tired but kind. "I'll wait for the tow truck and catch a ride with Mrs. Leroy. Don't forget your notebook." Joey never went anywhere without his notebook. In it were all the songs he had written, all the melodies that came to him at night when he couldn't sleep because the shelter was too noisy or too quiet or too everything. The notebook was now tucked under his shirt, the only thing he had managed to keep dry. As he turned the corner onto Bourbon Street, the sounds hit him first. Even through the rain, he could hear the sweet notes of jazz floating out of the open doors of clubs and bars. People laughed, musicians played, and for a moment, Joey forgot about his wet socks and empty stomach. The Midnight Melody Club stood proudly among the other buildings, its neon sign buzzing with a blue glow that reflected in the puddles. Joey had passed by it many times, always stopping to listen but never daring to go inside. But tonight was different. Tonight was open mic night. He had seen the sign last week and had been thinking about it ever since. Just one song, he whispered to himself, his breath visible in the cool evening air. Just one chance. Joey stood outside watching through the window. Inside, people sat at small round tables, their faces lit by candles, their hands holding glasses that sparkled in the dim light. A woman was singing on the small stage, her voice smooth like honey. When she finished, everyone clapped and she bowed with a smile that made Joey's heart hurt with wanting. He waited until there was a break in performances, when people were talking and ordering more drinks before slipping through the door. The warmth hit him first, followed by the smell of food that made his stomach growl embarrassingly loud. But nobody noticed him at first. He was good at being invisible when he needed to be. Joey made his way slowly toward the stage, trying not to drip too much on the polished wooden floor. His plan was simple: get to the piano, play one song, and leave before anyone could throw him out. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all he had. Then a large man with arms crossed over his chest spotted him. The man's eyes narrowed, and he nudged another man behind the bar. "Hey, kid," the bartender called out, his voice cutting through the chatter. "This ain't a place for children." "Where are your parents?" Joey froze, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. His clothes were not just wet, but dirty from the walk. The shelter hadn't had hot water for 3 days, and the last time he had been able to wash properly was at school before the weekend. I just wanted to play," Joey said, pulling his notebook from under his shirt. For open mic night, the bartender exchanged looks with the big man, who was now walking toward Joey. People at nearby tables were turning to look, their conversations dying as they noticed the soaking wet boy standing in a growing puddle of rainwater. "Get that kid out of here," someone muttered. He stank. Heat rushed to Joey's face. He knew he didn't smell good. He knew his clothes were dirty and his hair needed washing. But did they have to say it so loud? The big man, who Joey now realized was the bouncer, reached for his arm. "Come on, kid. This is no place for you, please," Joey said, his voice cracking slightly. "Just one song. I walked 3 miles to get here." "Rules are rules," the bouncer said, though his voice had softened a bit. "You need to be with an adult to be in here, and besides..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Joey knew what he was thinking. "Besides, you smell bad. Besides, you're making a mess on our clean floor. Besides, you don't belong here with these nice, clean people." A few customers were now openly wrinkling their noses or whispering behind their hands. Joey had never felt smaller or more unwanted. "I'll take him out," the bouncer said to the bartender, who nodded with relief. Joey was about to give up, to let himself be led back into the rain where at least his tears wouldn't be visible, when a voice called out from the back of the room, "Hold on there, Big Lou." The crowd parted slightly to reveal an old man sitting at a corner table. His skin was dark and weathered like well-loved leather, and his white hair formed a halo around his head. He stood up slowly, using a cane to steady himself. "What we got here?" the old man asked, making his way toward Joey. His eyes were kind but sharp, missing nothing. "Just some kid trying to crash open mic night, Mr. Blue," the bouncer explained. "I was just showing him out." Mr. Blue stopped in front of Joey, studying him carefully. Joey tried to stand straight to look braver than he felt. "You play?" Mr. Blue asked, nodding toward Joey's notebook. "Yes, sir," Joey answered. "Piano. The old man leaned closer. Joey tried not to cringe, knowing how he must smell, but Mr. Blue didn't seem to notice or care. Instead, he looked into Joey's eyes like he was searching for something important. "Where'd you learn?" "My grandma taught me the basics, but she died when I was 7. Since then, I've mostly taught myself. I make up songs." Joey clutched his notebook tighter. Mr. Blue nodded slowly, then turned to the bartender. "Ray, this boy is my guest tonight." The bartender looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Blue, with all due respect, we got health codes and I've been playing in this club since before you were born." Mr. Blue cut in, his voice gentle but firm. "I've brought more business through these doors than anyone else. I think you can make an exception for my guest." A tense silence fell. Joey held his breath. Finally, the bartender sighed. "Fine, but just for tonight, and he stays with you." Mr. Blue smiled, revealing a gap between his front teeth. "Thank you kindly." He turned to Joey. "What's your name, son?" "Joey," he answered, hardly believing his luck. "Well, Joey, I'm Arthur Blue. Most folks just call me Blue. I play piano here most nights." He gestured toward the beautiful grand piano on the stage. "That's my baby right there. Been playing her for 30 years. Joey stared at the piano with longing. It was so much nicer than his grandmother's old upright, so much nicer than the beat-up keyboard at school that was missing 3 keys. "Come on," Mr. Blue said, placing a gentle hand on Joey's shoulder. "Let's get you something to eat first. Can't play on an empty stomach?" Joey followed Mr. Blue to his table, aware of the stares following them. The old man ordered him a bowl of gumbo and a glass of water, then sat quietly while Joey ate. He tried not to gobble the food, but it was hard. He hadn't eaten since lunch at school, and that had been a small portion. "Easy now," Mr. Blue advised. "Music is about patience." "Eating should be too," Joey nodded, slowing down. As he ate, Mr. Blue asked him questions about his playing, about the songs in his notebook. He listened carefully to Joey's answers, nodding occasionally. "Why tonight?" Mr. Blue finally asked. "Why walk 3 miles in the rain?" Joey set down his spoon, the bowl now empty. "My mom's car broke down. We've been staying at the Pine Street shelter since the fire last month. There's no piano there, and I miss playing so much it hurts sometimes." He touched his chest. "In here." Mr. Blue's eyes softened. "Music's like that. Gets in your soul and won't let go." On stage, a saxophone player finished his set to enthusiastic applause. The host announced a short break before the next performer. "That's our cue," Mr. Blue said, standing up. "You ready?" Joey's heart jumped to his throat. "Now, but I don't look, son," Mr. Blue said, leaning down so only Joey could hear. "People might judge you for how you look or smell right now. But once you play, if you play with heart, they'll only remember the music. That's the power we have as musicians. We can make people forget everything else." Joey swallowed hard and nodded. He followed Mr. Blue to the stage, clutching his notebook. The host looked surprised when they approached. "This is Joey," Mr. Blue announced. "He's playing next." The host looked uncertain but didn't argue with Mr. Blue. As Joey took a seat at the piano bench, he heard whispers and a few snickers from the audience. His hands trembled slightly as he placed his notebook on the stand and opened it to one of his favorite compositions. Mr. Blue leaned close one more time. "Remember, Joey, play with heart. The rest is just noise." With those words, the old man stepped back, leaving Joey alone at the piano. The spotlight felt hot and bright. Joey looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some doubtful, some already dismissive. He took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the keys and prepared to play. Joey's fingers hovered over the keys for what felt like forever. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Someone coughed. A glass clinked against a table. The manager stood near the bar, arms crossed, clearly waiting for this odd interruption to be over so the real musicians could return to the stage. "Get on with it, kid," a man called from the back, followed by a few uncomfortable laughs. Joey closed his eyes. He thought about his grandmother and how she used to say, "When words fail, music speaks." He thought about his mother working double shifts just to keep a roof over their heads. He thought about the shelter with its strange smells and stranger noises. Then he pressed down on the keys. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, a simple melody he had written after the fire, when everything they owned was gone. It was a sad tune, but with something else woven through it. A thread of hope, perhaps, or resilience. Joey's left hand joined in, adding depth and rhythm, building slowly like a story being told. The chatter in the room didn't stop immediately. People were still whispering, still laughing softly, still ordering drinks. But then Joey began the second movement of his piece, the part where the melody climbed higher, reaching for something just out of grasp. His fingers moved faster, more confident now. The tempo picked up, and so did the volume. A few heads turned. The bartender paused mid-pour. Joey leaned into the music, swaying slightly on the bench. He had forgotten where he was, forgotten the stares and the whispers. In his mind, he was back home, playing for his grandmother while she knitted in her favorite chair. By the third minute, the club had gone completely silent. Every eye was on the small, wet boy at the piano. Hands that had been raised with drinks now hung in midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the servers had stopped to listen, trays balanced on their palms. Joey's playing wasn't perfect. He hit wrong notes sometimes, and his timing wasn't always steady. But there was something in the music that caught at the heart. Raw emotion poured through every phrase. It was the kind of playing that couldn't be taught, only felt. Mr. Blue stood at the edge of the stage, his eyes closed, head nodding slightly to the rhythm. A small smile played across his face, and for a moment he looked decades younger. As Joey reached the final part of his composition, a series of gentle, falling notes like rain on a rooftop, he opened his eyes. The club was so quiet he could hear the clock ticking behind the bar. Every face was turned toward him, every breath held. The last note hung in the air, fading slowly into silence. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if the world had stopped spinning just for a moment. Then Mr. Blue began to clap. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the entire room erupted in applause. People stood from their chairs, whistling and cheering. A woman in the front row wiped a tear from her cheek. Joey blinked in surprise. His face flushed, but this time not from shame. He stood awkwardly and gave a small bow, just like he'd seen the woman singer do earlier. The applause continued as Mr. Blue walked onto the stage and placed an arm around Joey's shoulders. "What did I tell you?" he said quietly. "They only remember the music now." The manager approached the stage, his earlier disdain replaced with something like wonder. "Kid, that was something else," he said, shaking his head. "What do you call that piece?" "After the Fire," Joey answered, his voice barely audible over the continuing applause. "Did you write that yourself?" The manager asked, clearly struggling to believe it. Joey nodded. "I have others," he said, gesturing to his notebook. "I bet you do," the manager said, looking at Joey with new eyes. He turned to Mr. Blue. "Arthur, you knew about this boy?" "Just met him tonight," Mr. Blue replied. "But I know talent when I hear it." The manager ran a hand through his hair. "Well, I feel like a real fool now." He looked at Joey again. "Listen, kid, Joey, right? Would you consider playing another song?" Before Joey could answer, Mr. Blue stepped in. "Now hold on, Ray. The boy walked 3 miles in the rain to get here. He's soaked through and probably exhausted. Let's not push our luck." Ray, the manager, nodded quickly. "Of course, you're right. But maybe he could come back next week for our Sunday afternoon session? It's more of a family crowd then." Joey's eyes widened. "Really? You'd let me play again?" "Let you?" Ray laughed. "Kid, I'd pay you to play. Not much, mind you, we're not rolling in cash here, but something." "What do you say?" Joey couldn't believe what he was hearing. Someone wanted to pay him to play piano. His music. Yes, please." "Good, that's settled then," Mr. Blue said. "Now, Ray, I believe there's a staff shower in the back office, isn't there?" "And maybe a t-shirt this young man could borrow?" Ray nodded quickly, perhaps trying to make up for his earlier behavior. Absolutely. Follow me, Joey. As they walked off the stage, people reached out to pat Joey's back or shake his hand. An older woman pressed a $20 bill into his palm. For lessons, she said with a wink. Joey tried to give it back, but she had already turned away. In the back office, Ray showed Joey to a small bathroom with a shower. Take your time, he said. I'll find you something dry to wear. For the first time in days, Joey stood under hot water, watching as the grime swirled down the drain. He used the soap to wash his hair, scrubbing until his scalp tingled. By the time he stepped out, he felt like a new person. True to his word, Ray had left a clean t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants outside the door. They were too big, but Joey rolled up the pant legs and cinched the waistband as tight as it would go. His own clothes were being washed and dried in the small laundry area the club used for napkins and tablecloths. When Joey returned to the main room, a jazz quartet was playing, but several people still came up to compliment him on his performance. Mr. Blue waved him over to his table, where a plate of food waited. Eat, the old man said. Then we need to call your mother. She'll be worried sick. Joey hadn't thought about that. The phone at the shelter doesn't always work, he said between bites of the best fried chicken he'd ever tasted. We'll keep trying, Mr. Blue assured him. And if we can't reach her, I'll drive you back myself. Joey looked up in surprise. You have a car? I may be old, but I still get around, Mr. Blue chuckled. Been driving the same Buick for 30 years. After Joey finished eating, Ray brought him to the office to use the phone. It took 3 tries, but finally someone at the shelter answered and went to find his mother. Joey? Her voice was tight with worry. Where are you? I've been looking everywhere. I'm okay, Mom, Joey said quickly. I'm at the Midnight Melody Club on Bourbon Street. I played piano here tonight. You what? Joey, that's across town. How did you even get there? I walked. But Mom, listen. They want me to come back and play again. They're going to pay me! There was a pause on the other end of the line. When his mother spoke again, her voice was gentler. That's wonderful, honey. But you can't just disappear like that. I was so scared. I'm sorry, Joey said, feeling guilty for the first time since he'd arrived at the club. I should have left a note. Yes, you should have, she agreed. Now how are you getting back here? Do you need me to try and find a ride? No need, ma'am, Mr. Blue said, having entered the office quietly. I can drive him back to the shelter. That is, if you're comfortable with that. Joey quickly explained who Mr. Blue was and what had happened. His mother was quiet for a moment. Let me speak to the manager there, she finally said. Ray took the phone and assured Joey's mother that Mr. Blue was indeed a long-time, respected musician at the club and that Joey would be perfectly safe with him. He also confirmed that they wanted Joey to return to play again. By the time Joey hung up, his wet clothes had been dried, but Ray suggested he keep the t-shirt as a souvenir. It's our club shirt, he explained. All the regular musicians have one. Joey clutched it to his chest, unable to speak. A real musician's shirt. His very own. As promised, Mr. Blue drove Joey back to the shelter. The old Buick smelled of tobacco and peppermint, and the radio was permanently tuned to a jazz station. During the drive, Mr. Blue asked Joey about his musical background, and seemed impressed by how much the boy had taught himself. You've got a gift, Mr. Blue said as they pulled up to the shelter. But gifts need nurturing. Would you be interested in some real lessons? Joey's heart leapt. More than anything. But he trailed off, thinking about their financial situation. Don't worry about money, Mr. Blue said, seeming to read his mind. Where I come from, when we see talent, we help it grow. That's how the music stays alive. Joey's mother was waiting at the entrance to the shelter. Her face was tired but relieved as she hugged Joey tightly. Don't you ever scare me like that? Again, she whispered into his hair. Mr. Blue introduced himself properly and explained his offer to teach Joey. Joey's mother looked hesitant. I don't know how we could repay you, she began. No repayment necessary, Mr. Blue said firmly. 30 years ago, someone did the same for me. I'm just passing it on. As they talked, making arrangements for Joey's first lesson, Joey looked up at the night sky. The rain had stopped, and a few stars were visible between the clouds. For the first time since the fire, he felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. His notebook of songs was still clutched in his hand, but it felt different now. It wasn't just a collection of dreams anymore. It was the beginning of something real. The week that followed was like something from a dream. Joey found himself sitting beside Mr. Blue at a real piano 3 times that week, learning things he'd never known about music. The old man was patient but demanding. Again, Mr. Blue would say, tapping his cane gently on the floor. Feel the rhythm in your bones, not just your fingers. They met at a small music shop called Tanner's, where the owner, a round-faced woman with a cloud of gray hair, let them use the backroom piano for free. Any friend of Blue's is a friend of mine, she told Joey with a warm smile. Besides, it does that old piano good to be played by young hands. Joey learned that Mr. Blue had once traveled the world playing with famous jazz bands. He'd performed in Paris and Tokyo, New York, and Chicago. There were faded photographs on the walls of the music shop showing a younger Mr. Blue standing beside musicians, whose names even Joey recognized. "Why did you come back to New Orleans?" Joey asked during their 3rd lesson, while taking a break to rest his fingers. Mr. Blue gazed out the small window that looked onto the alley behind the shop. "Music is like a river," he said thoughtfully. "And New Orleans, well, this city is where my river begins and ends. I needed to come home, to give back to the place that gave me my start." Joey nodded, though he wasn't sure he fully understood. "Someday you might leave too," Mr. Blue continued, "and that's as it should be. But remember where you came from. The struggles, the hard times, they're part of your music now." On Saturday, Mr. Blue took Joey shopping. Joey's mother had been hesitant at first. They'd only known this man for a week, but Mr. Blue had visited the shelter twice, bringing food for everyone and speaking with the staff, gradually earning her trust. "He needs proper clothes for tomorrow's performance," Mr. Blue insisted. "Nothing fancy, just clean and decent." So Joey found himself at a second-hand store, trying on button-up shirts while Mr. Blue sat in a chair by the dressing rooms, offering opinions. "Too big. Too formal. That's not bad. Try the blue one again." In the end, they found a simple white shirt that fit well, a pair of black pants that were only slightly too long, and a dark blue tie that Mr. Blue insisted completed the look. "A musician should look like a musician," he said firmly. When Joey protested about the cost, Mr. Blue waved him off. "Consider it an investment. Besides, Ray's paying you tomorrow. You can start saving for your own things." That night, Joey could hardly sleep. His mother had washed and pressed his new clothes, and they hung on the back of a chair in their small room at the shelter. He stared at them in the dim light, trying to imagine himself playing at the club again, this time as an invited performer. "You should sleep," his mother said softly from her bed across the room. "Big day tomorrow." "I can't," Joey admitted. "What if they don't like me this time? What if last week was just, I don't know, a fluke or something?" His mother sat up and reached over to brush the hair from his forehead. "It wasn't a fluke, Joey. Mr. Blue wouldn't waste his time if he didn't believe in your talent. I've seen how hard you've been practicing." Joey had indeed been practicing whenever he could. The shelter had an old upright piano in the community room that was horribly out of tune, but it was better than nothing. He'd spent hours there, working on the pieces Mr. Blue had taught him and refining his own compositions. "Try to rest," his mother urged. "Even if you just close your eyes and breathe deeply." Joey tried, but his mind kept racing with possibilities. What if he forgot the music? What if he hit too many wrong notes? What if... He must have fallen asleep eventually because suddenly it was morning and sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains. His mother was already up, making coffee on the hot plate they were allowed to keep in their room. "Big day," she said, smiling over at him. They had breakfast in the shelter's dining room, powdered eggs and toast, but Joey was too nervous to eat much. Afterward, his mother helped him get ready, buttoning his new shirt and showing him how to tie his tie. "Your father wore ties like this," she said, her fingers working deftly. "He would have been so proud of you." Joey barely remembered his father, who had died when he was 4. But sometimes when he played piano, he felt like maybe his father could hear him somehow. Mr. Blue arrived at noon to drive them to the club. He wore a suit that had seen better days but was impeccably clean, with a bright red handkerchief in the breast pocket. "Ready to make some music?" he asked Joey. The Sunday afternoon session at the Midnight Melody Club was indeed different from the nighttime crowd. There were families with children, older couples, and groups of friends enjoying late brunches. The lighting was brighter, the music more subdued. Ray, the manager, greeted them warmly at the door. "Our young prodigy returns," he announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. A few people looked over curiously. Joey felt his face grow hot with embarrassment, but Mr. Blue placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't mind Ray," he said quietly. "He just likes to build up the acts. Makes people order more food." They showed Joey to a small room behind the stage where he could wait until his performance time. His mother sat with him while Mr. Blue went to talk with the band that would be accompanying Joey for one of his pieces. "You've practiced hard," his mother reminded him. "Just play like you do at the shelter, like no one's watching." Joey nodded, but his hands felt cold and stiff. He flexed his fingers, trying to warm them up. At exactly 1:30, Ray came to get him. "You're on, kid." Joey walked onto the stage, blinking in the bright lights. The club was full, every table occupied, with people standing along the back wall. He recognized a few faces from the shelter, people who had scraped together enough money to come support him. His mother sat at a small table near the front, smiling encouragingly. The piano waited, its lid propped open, keys gleaming. Joey took his seat, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands in his lap for a moment, taking a deep breath like Mr. Blue had taught him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ray announced, "I'm pleased to present a young musician who made quite an impression here last week. Please welcome Joey Parker." There was polite applause as Joey placed his hands on the keys. The piece he had chosen to start with was one of his own compositions, something he called Morning Light because he'd written it at dawn one day when he couldn't sleep at the shelter. The first notes rang out clear and true. Joey closed his eyes, letting his fingers find their way across the familiar pattern. The nervousness began to fade as he lost himself in the music. When he finished the first piece, the applause was enthusiastic. Joey smiled shyly before beginning his second song, a jazz standard that Mr. Blue had taught him. Halfway through, Mr. Blue himself joined him on stage with his saxophone, and the two of them played together, the old man following the boy's lead as they wove the melody between them. For his final piece, Joey was joined by the house band, drums, bass, and Mr. Blue still on saxophone. They played After the Fire, the piece that had so moved the audience the week before, but this time with the added depth of the full band. Joey had never played with other musicians before, and the feeling was incredible, like being carried on a wave of sound. When they finished, the entire club erupted in applause and cheers. Joey stood, bowing awkwardly as Mr. Blue had taught him. His mother was on her feet, tears streaming down her face, but smiling wider than he'd seen since before the fire. Ray approached the microphone as Joey was about to leave the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just witnessed is something special. I'm pleased to announce that Joey will be joining us every Sunday afternoon as a regular performer." More applause followed this announcement. Joey looked at Mr. Blue in shock, who nodded in confirmation. "That's right," Ray continued. "And today someone very important is in our audience." He gestured to a man sitting at the bar, a tall, well-dressed man who Joey hadn't noticed before. "Mr. Wilson is a talent scout for River City Records, and he's expressed interest in our young pianist." The man stood and raised his glass toward Joey, who felt his knees go weak. A record company scout had heard him play. After the performance, Joey sat with his mother, Mr. Blue, Ray, and Mr. Wilson from the record company. The adults talked while Joey tried to take it all in. "He needs proper training, of course," Mr. Wilson was saying. "But there's something raw and real in his playing. We have a youth program that helps develop promising musicians. Scholarships, weekend classes, summer intensives. And where would these classes take place?" Joey's mother asked, her voice cautious but hopeful. "Right here in New Orleans," Mr. Wilson assured her. "We're all about nurturing local talent." Joey looked between the adults, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Just 8 days ago, he had been standing in the rain looking through the window of this very club, dreaming of playing here just once. "And now, what do you think, Joey?" Mr. Blue asked, bringing him into the conversation. "Think you might like some proper music education?" Joey nodded, words failing him for a moment. "Yes, sir. More than anything. It won't be easy," Mr. Wilson warned. "It's hard work. Hours of practice every day." "I can work hard," Joey said firmly. "I'm not afraid of that." Mr. Wilson smiled, seeming satisfied with this answer. "Well then, I think we have the beginnings of a plan." As they left the club that afternoon, Joey carrying his payment for the day's performance in an envelope, Mr. Blue pulled him aside. "Remember what I told you about rivers?" the old man asked. Joey nodded. "That they have a beginning and an end." "That's right. Well, young Joey, I think your river just found its true beginning. Where it goes now, that's up to you." Joey looked back at the club, then at his mother waiting by Mr. Blue's car, her face more peaceful than he'd seen in months. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. Music had changed his life forever. Life has a funny way of changing when you least expect it. For Joey and his mother, those changes came quickly after that Sunday performance. The very next day, Mr. Wilson from River City Records called the shelter and asked to speak with Joey's mother. By the end of that conversation, Joey had been enrolled in their Young Musicians program with a full scholarship. "You start this Saturday," his mother told him, her eyes shining with tears of joy. 2 hours every weekend with access to their practice rooms during the week. Joey could hardly believe it. "But what about the shelter rules? We have to be back by curfew." His mother took a deep breath. "That's the other thing. Mr. Wilson knows someone who works with a housing program for artists and musicians. There's an apartment available. It's small, just 1 bedroom, but..." Joey's heart nearly stopped. "A real apartment? With our own bathroom and everything?" His mother nodded. "It's a reduced rent because of the program, and with my job at the hospital plus what you'll make playing at the club, we should be able to manage it." 2 days later, they moved into their new home. It was indeed small. A tiny kitchen, a living area just big enough for a couch, 1 bedroom with barely room for 2 twin beds, and a bathroom that you couldn't turn around in without bumping into something. But to Joey, it was a palace. "The best part is this," his mother said, pointing to a notice board in the building's lobby. "The community center across the street has a piano that residents can use. You'll need to sign up for time slots, but you can practice there every day." The community center became Joey's second home. He would rush there after school, practice for an hour or 2, then head to the Midnight Melody Club for his Sunday rehearsals with Mr. Blue. The old musician had introduced Joey to the house band. Frank on drums, David on bass, and Louis on trumpet. They were all professional musicians who had been playing together for years, but they treated Joey with respect, listening to his ideas and teaching him about ensemble playing. "The key to playing with others," Louis explained during one rehearsal, "is to listen as much as you play. It's a conversation, not a speech." Joey soaked up every bit of knowledge they offered. His natural talent combined with his newfound training began to create something special. His playing became more refined but kept the raw emotion that had first captured people's attention. At the Young Musicians program, Joey met other kids who loved music as much as he did. There was Theo, who played violin with such precision it could make you cry, Lynn, whose voice could fill a room without a microphone, and Danny, who could play 5 different instruments but loved the upright bass best of all. For the first time in his life, Joey had friends who understood him, who didn't think it was weird that he heard melodies in his head all the time, or that he sometimes tapped out rhythms on his desk at school. "You should try composing for all of us," Danny suggested one day after they had jammed together during their lunch break. "Write something that uses all our instruments." The idea took root in Joey's mind. He began working on a piece that would showcase each of his friends' talents while still holding together as a unified whole. He called it Found Family because that's what these people were becoming to him. Meanwhile, Joey's Sunday performances at the Midnight Melody Club were drawing bigger crowds each week. Word had spread about the young piano player who could make grown men cry with his music. People would line up outside before the doors opened, hoping to get a good table near the stage. "We might need to add a second show," Ray told Joey one Sunday as he handed him his payment, now twice what it had been that first week. "Maybe Saturday afternoons too." Joey looked at Mr. Blue, who had become his unofficial manager in addition to his mentor. "School comes first," Mr. Blue said firmly, "and his training at the program. But maybe once a month we could do a Saturday show." Ray nodded. "Fair enough. I don't want to burn the kid out." As word about Joey spread, local news stations began calling the club, asking to do stories about him. Mr. Blue and Joey's mother screened these requests carefully. "You don't have to talk to any of them if you don't want to," his mother assured him. "This is about your music, not about being famous." But Joey agreed to one interview with a reporter from the local public radio station. The woman was kind and asked thoughtful questions about his compositions, and musical influences rather than focusing on the poor kid from the shelter angle that others had tried to push. "What inspires your music?" she asked him. Joey thought for a moment. "Life, I guess. The good parts and the hard parts. My grandma always told me that music is just feelings that turn into sounds, so I try to be honest about what I'm feeling when I play." The interview aired the following week, and suddenly even more people were coming to hear Joey play. Among them was Dr. Harmon, the director of the New Orleans Academy of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the city. After hearing Joey perform, Dr. Harmon approached Mr. Blue. "That young man has extraordinary potential," he said. "We have an audition next month for our full-time program. Do you think he'd be interested?" Mr. Blue glanced at Joey, who was chatting with some audience members who had bought copies of a CD the club had helped him record of his original compositions. "I think he might be," Mr. Blue said carefully. "But there's the matter of tuition." Dr. Harmon nodded. "We offer scholarships to exceptional students. Based on what I've heard today, I believe he would qualify." When Mr. Blue told Joey about the opportunity, the boy's first reaction was excitement, followed quickly by doubt. "The academy? But that's for really serious musicians," Joey said. "Like people who've been playing since they were babies." "And what do you think you are?" Mr. Blue asked with a raised eyebrow. "I've been in this business for 50 years, and I don't say this lightly. You have a gift that can't be taught. The academy would give you the technical skills to match that natural talent." That night, Joey talked it over with his mother. "It would mean changing schools," she pointed out. "Leaving your friends." "I know," Joey said, thinking about his classmates at the public school he attended. While things had improved since they'd moved out of the shelter, no more teasing about his clothes or being dirty, he still didn't have close friends there. His real friends were at the Young Musicians program and at the club. "But it's also a huge opportunity," his mother continued, "the kind that doesn't come along very often." In the end, Joey decided to audition. The piece he chose was the most challenging one he had written, a composition he called "The Long Walk Home," that was inspired by that rainy night he had trudged 3 miles to the Midnight Melody Club. For weeks, he practiced until his fingers ached and his mother had to remind him to eat and sleep. Mr. Blue worked with him on the technical aspects, while also reminding him not to lose the emotion that made his playing special. "Technical skill will impress them," Mr. Blue told him, "but heart will move them. You need both." The day of the audition arrived cold and clear. Joey wore the same outfit he had worn for his first real performance at the club, though his mother had needed to buy him new pants as he'd grown taller in the months since. The Academy's auditorium was intimidating, all polished wood and perfect acoustics. A panel of 5 judges sat at a table, their faces serious as they looked over his application. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Parker," the woman in the center said. Joey sat at the grand piano, the finest instrument he had ever played. He placed his hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began. The piece started simply with a melody that echoed the sound of rain. Then it built layer by layer, telling the story of that night, the hope, the fear, the determination, the moment of rejection, and finally the triumph when his music was heard at last. When he finished, there was silence. Joey sat with his hands in his lap, afraid to look up. Then one of the judges cleared his throat. "Mr. Parker, how long have you been playing piano?" "About 5 years, sir," Joey answered. "My grandmother taught me the basics when I was 7 before she died. Then I mostly taught myself until I met Mr. Blue earlier this year." The judges exchanged glances. "And this piece?" another judge asked. "You composed this yourself?" "Yes, ma'am." More glances were exchanged. The woman in the center made a note on her paper. "Thank you, Mr. Parker," she said. "We'll be in touch within the week." Joey left the auditorium feeling both drained and exhilarated. His mother and Mr. Blue were waiting outside. "How did it go?" his mother asked anxiously. Joey shrugged. "I played the best I could." "They didn't say much." "They never do," Mr. Blue assured him. "Judges like to keep their cards close to their chest." 3 days later, a letter arrived addressed to Joey. His mother called him from the community center where he was practicing with his friends from the Young Musicians program. "There's a letter from the academy," she said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Do you want me to open it?" "No," Joey said quickly. "Wait for me. I'm coming home now." He raced back to their apartment, taking the stairs 2 at a time. His mother was waiting, the envelope on the small kitchen table between them. Whatever it says, she told him. I'm already so proud of you. Joey picked up the envelope. It felt heavy in his hands. Too heavy for a rejection, he hoped. With trembling fingers, he tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Mr. Parker, he read aloud. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the New Orleans Academy of Music with a full scholarship. He couldn't read further because his mother was hugging him, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. That night, they celebrated at the Midnight Melody Club. Ray closed the place to regular customers and hosted a private party for Joey. Everyone who had been part of his journey was there. The band members, his friends from the Young Musicians program, even some of the staff from the shelter who had supported them during their hardest times. Mr. Blue made a toast, his voice cracking with emotion. To Joey, who reminded an old man why music matters, and to all of you who saw his worth, even when the world tried to look away. As Joey looked around at the faces of people who had become his extended family, he thought about how much had changed in just a few months. From that first rainy night when he'd been told to leave because he smelled bad, to now, accepted into one of the best music schools in the city. Life really did have a funny way of changing when you least expected it. 5 years can change everything. Joey stood backstage at the Grand Theater, adjusting his tie and trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. At 17, he had grown tall and lean, his once thin face filled out, his eyes still holding that same intensity, but now matched with confidence that came from years of hard work and growing success. 5 minutes. Joey, the stage manager called. He nodded, taking a deep breath. No matter how many performances he gave, and there had been many over the past 5 years, he still felt that mixture of terror and excitement before stepping onto the stage. This concert was different, though. This was the culmination of everything he'd worked for since that rainy night, when he'd walked into the Midnight Melody Club as a smelly, soaked 12-year-old nobody wanted around. Tonight, he would be performing with the New Orleans Symphony Orchestra. They would be playing River's Journey, a full orchestral piece he had composed as his final project at the Academy of Music. The piece told his story, from those desperate days after the fire to the present, with each movement representing a different chapter in his life. You ready for this, kid? Joey turned to find Mr. Blue standing in the doorway of his dressing room. The old man moved more slowly now, leaning more heavily on his cane, but his eyes were as bright as ever, his smile just as wide. Ready as I'll ever be, Joey replied. Is my mom out there? Front row center, Mr. Blue confirmed. Along with half the neighborhood, the entire staff of the club, all your teachers from the academy, and I think I even spotted those folks from the shelter. Joey smiled. It meant everything to have those people here, the ones who had believed in him from the beginning, who had seen value in him when others had only seen a dirty kid who smelled bad. The journey hadn't been easy. The academy had been challenging in ways Joey hadn't expected. The other students came from wealthy families with private music teachers and years of formal training. Many of them had performed in competitions since they were 6 or 7 years old. Joey had talent and passion, but he'd had to work twice as hard to catch up on the technical aspects of music that the others had been learning for years. There were nights he'd cried from frustration, days he'd wondered if he belonged there at all, but he had kept going. His mother had worked extra shifts to give him the time to practice. Mr. Blue had continued mentoring him, pushing him when he needed pushing, supporting him when he needed support. And slowly, he had not just caught up but begun to stand out. By his 3rd year at the academy, Joey's compositions were winning national competitions. His unique style, technical skill blended with raw emotion, caught the attention of music critics and composers across the country. A video of him performing at a school concert went viral online, bringing offers from music colleges as far away as New York and London. Through it all, Joey had kept playing his Sunday shows at the Midnight Melody Club. No matter how busy he got, he never missed that performance. The club had given him his start, and he remained loyal to the place and the people who had first seen his potential. 1 minute, Joey, the stage manager called. Mr. Blue squeezed Joey's shoulder. Remember what I told you that first night? Joey nodded. Play with heart. The rest is just noise. That's right. Nothing's changed. Bigger stage, more people, but it's still just you and the music. Joey hugged the old man tightly. Thank you. For everything. Go get 'em, kid. Mr. Blue stepped back, his eyes suspiciously bright. Show him what music from the heart really sounds like. Joey walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. The Grand Theater was sold out, 1,800 seats filled with people who had come to hear his music. It was overwhelming and humbling all at once. The conductor, Maestro Wilson, no relation to the Mr. Wilson from the record company, shook Joey's hand and gestured for him to take his place at the grand piano that stood center stage. The orchestra members watched him with respect, no longer seeing him as just a kid but as a composer and fellow musician. Joey looked out into the audience. As Mr. Blue had promised, his mother sat in the front row. She looked beautiful in a new dress she'd bought just for this occasion, her hair styled elegantly, her face glowing with pride. Beside her sat Ray from the club, Frank and David and Louie from the band, his friends from the Young Musicians program, and teachers from the academy. And there, just to his mother's right, was Dr. Harmon, the academy director who had taken a chance on a self-taught boy from a shelter. Beside Dr. Harmon sat someone Joey didn't recognize, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit who was studying Joey with great interest. Joey turned to the piano, placing his fingers on the keys. The conductor raised his baton and the theater fell silent. The first movement began softly, a piano solo that echoed the rain falling on that fateful night. Gradually, other instruments joined in, first the strings, then woodwinds, building the theme that represented Joey's walk to the club, his determination, his hope. The second movement shifted to minor keys, creating tension as the brass section entered, the moment of rejection, the pain of being unwanted. Joey's piano weaved through it all, persistent, refusing to be silenced. Then came the third movement, the transformation. Joey's hands flew across the keys as the full orchestra swelled behind him, creating a sound so rich and powerful, it seemed to lift the audience from their seats. This was the moment when music had changed everything, when his playing had made people forget their prejudices and just listen. The fourth movement was gentler, representing the years of learning and growth. Solos from different instruments, violin, cello, flute, clarinet, represented the various people who had helped him along the way, each melody eventually harmonizing with Joey's piano. For the final movement, Joey had written something special, a jazz-influenced piece that brought the orchestra into new territory. It was challenging music that required both classical precision and jazz improvisation. Joey had worked closely with the orchestra for weeks to get it just right. As the final notes faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Joey remained at the piano, eyes closed, heart pounding. Then the applause began. Hesitant at first, then building to a thunderous standing ovation that seemed to shake the very walls of the theater. Joey stood and bowed, then gestured to the orchestra to stand as well. The applause continued for several minutes. He saw his mother wiping away tears, saw Mr. Blue leaning on his cane but clapping enthusiastically, saw Dr. Harmon nodding with satisfaction. After the concert, there was a reception in the theater's grand foyer. People lined up to congratulate Joey, to shake his hand, to tell him how his music had moved them. He did his best to thank each person, but his eyes kept searching for the faces that mattered most to him. His mother found him first, wrapping him in a tight hug. "Your grandmother would have been so proud," she whispered. "I wish she could have been here." "She was," Joey replied. "I felt her in the music." Mr. Blue came next, moving slowly through the crowd. "Not bad, kid," he said with a wink. "Though you rushed the third movement a bit," Joey laughed. Even after his greatest triumph, Mr. Blue would always push him to do better. That was why he loved the old man. Dr. Harmon approached with the distinguished man Joey had noticed earlier. "Joey, I'd like you to meet Mr. Thornton from Juilliard School of Music in New York." Joey's heart skipped a beat. Juilliard was the most prestigious music school in the country, perhaps the world. "Mr. Parker," Thornton said, extending his hand. "Your composition was extraordinary. We don't often hear such mature work from someone your age." "Thank you, sir," Joey replied, shaking the man's hand. "Dr. Harmon has told me about your background," Thornton continued. "Your journey is remarkable. We at Juilliard believe you have the potential for a significant career in composition. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to join us next fall." Joey stared at the man, unable to process what he was hearing. "Juilliard? A full scholarship? That's incredibly generous," he finally managed to say. "I'm honored." Think about it, Thornton said, handing Joey a card. We can discuss details later, but I wanted you to know that we see something special in your work. As the reception continued, Joey found a quiet corner to catch his breath. Ray from the club found him there. Quite a night, huh? Ray said, handing Joey a glass of water. A far cry from when you first walked into my club. Joey smiled. I was just thinking about that. How you wanted to throw me out because I smelled bad. Ray had the grace to look embarrassed. Not my finest moment. Thank goodness for Mr. Blue. Yes, Joey agreed. Thank goodness for Mr. Blue. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the theater was quiet, Joey sat alone on the edge of the stage, looking out at the empty seats. So much had happened in 5 years. From a homeless kid playing on an out-of-tune piano in a shelter to this, a composer with his work performed by a symphony orchestra, with an offer from Juilliard in his pocket. He thought about all the people who had helped him get here, his mother who had worked so hard to support his dream, Mr. Blue who had seen his potential when others saw only a dirty kid, Ray who had given him his first real chance, Dr. Harmon who had opened the door to formal education. But he also thought about his own journey, the countless hours of practice, the nights spent composing instead of sleeping, the determination to prove that he belonged in these musical spaces that had seemed so far out of reach. The theater door opened, and his mother's voice called out, "Joey? Are you ready to go?" He stood up, taking one last look at the grand piano that had been his partner tonight. "Yes," he called back. "I'm coming." As they walked out into the cool night air, Joey looked up at the stars. The same stars that had been visible that night after the rain stopped, when he'd played his first notes at the Midnight Melody Club. The night that had changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" his mother asked. Joey smiled. "I was thinking about rivers," he said. "About how they have a beginning and an end, but it's the journey in between that matters most." His mother slipped her arm through his. "And your river?" "Still flowing," Joey replied. "Still moving forward," and it was. From the moment his fingers had first touched those piano keys in the club, making everyone hold their breath, Joey's life had become a river of music. Sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always flowing toward something greater than he could have imagined.